We think of the ancient world as a place of white marble and noble philosophers. But behind the statues was a reality so dark, it would make modern forensic files look like bedtime stories. Today, we're looking at 3 cases where history and horror collided and left physical evidence. The Shackled Shadow of Athens. In the year 100 AD, if you were looking for real estate in Athens, you might have found the deal of a lifetime. A massive, sprawling mansion, luxurious, well-located, and priced so low it was practically free. But there was a catch. Nobody who moved in stayed for more than a week. In fact, most didn't even make it through the first night. Now, before you dismiss this as just another ghost story, you need to know who wrote it down. This account comes from Pliny the Younger. Pliny wasn't some campfire storyteller. He was one of Rome's most elite lawyers, a high-ranking senator, and the man who famously documented the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. He was a man of cold, hard facts, and he swore this was true. Locals called it the Plague House. They said that at the stroke of midnight, the air would turn frigid. Then the silence would be shattered by the sound of iron chains, clink, drag, clink, echoing through the halls. Then he would appear. A skeletal old man, skin hanging off his bones, hair matted and filthy with heavy iron shackles bolted to his wrists and ankles. People literally died of fright in that house. Others were driven into a permanent state of psychosis. The villa was eventually abandoned, left to rot in the heart of the city, until a man named Athenodorus arrived. Athenodorus was a Stoic philosopher. To a Stoic, fear is just a choice, and logic is the only God. He heard the story, smiled, and rented the house immediately. On his first night, he didn't bring a sword or a crucifix. He brought his writing tablet, a lamp, and his focus. It's late. The house is silent. Suddenly, clink. The sound of metal dragging across the floor starts in the distance. It gets closer, louder. It's right outside his door. Most people would be hyperventilating by now, but Athenodorus, he doesn't even look up. He just keeps writing. He doesn't want his mind to create shadows out of fear. The ghost enters the room. It stands directly behind him. It begins rattling its chains right over his head, a deafening metallic roar. The philosopher finally looks back, sees the skeletal figure beckoning him with a bony finger. And you know what he does? Finally, Athenodorus rises, picks up his lamp, and follows the spirit. The ghost leads him out to a deserted courtyard, points to a specific patch of dirt, and in an instant, it vanishes like smoke. The next day, Athenodorus didn't call a priest. He called the city magistrates. He told them, "Dig here." A few feet down, the shovels hit something hard. They found a skeleton. But it wasn't just a body. It was a man who had been bound in heavy iron chains while he was still alive. Over the decades, the bones and the rusted metal had literally fused together into one horrific mass. In the ancient world, being left unburied was the ultimate nightmare. They believed that without a proper funeral, your soul was locked out of the afterlife, forced to wander the earth in agony. After the city gave the remains a proper public burial, the hauntings stopped forever. But it makes you wonder, who was that man in the chains? And what did he do? Or what was done to him that required his body to be bound even in death? Locusta, the state's angel of death. Meet Locusta of Gaul. In the history of the Roman Empire, her name was whispered with more terror than any invading army. She is history's first documented serial killer. But she wasn't some rogue monster hiding in an alleyway. She was a professional. She was a woman on the imperial payroll with a government license to kill. Locusta was a master of toxicology. She didn't just poison people, she engineered medical mysteries. When Empress Agrippina decided her husband, Emperor Claudius, had lived long enough, she didn't send an assassin with a blade. She sent Locusta with a single mushroom. Claudius died in agony, but the public was told it was just a bad meal. Agrippina's son Nero was now emperor, and Nero didn't just like Locusta's work. He was obsessed with it. Nero was so impressed that he gave Locusta a full pardon, a massive estate, and something truly psychotic, her own school of poisons. This wasn't a school for learning. It was a laboratory of human suffering. Nero provided Locusta with a steady supply of test subjects, condemned criminals and nameless slaves. While the rest of Rome was at the theater, Locusta was in her cellar with a stopwatch, timing exactly how long it took for a human's lungs to seize or their heart to literally explode. But her greatest challenge was the young Britannicus, Nero's rival to the throne. This kid had a taster, a servant who sampled every drop of food to ensure it wasn't poisoned. To kill him, Locusta had to be a genius. She served Britannicus a soup that was purposely boiling hot. The taster tried it, and it was safe. But when Britannicus complained it was too hot to drink, a servant added cool water to the bowl. Locusta had poisoned only the water. Britannicus took one sip and collapsed. Nero calmly told the guests his brother was just having an epileptic fit, and continued his dinner while the boy's body was dragged out of the room. Nero was so paranoid about the speed of her poisons that before the banquet, he forced Locusta to test the brew on a pig right in his private bedroom. When the pig dropped dead instantly, Nero finally smiled. He was satisfied. But when Nero eventually fell, Locusta's protection vanished. The new emperor, Galba, saw her for what she was, a human weapon. She was led through the streets of Rome in heavy chains. Now the records of her execution are bizarre. While most were beheaded, some ancient accounts suggest a much stranger, more poetic end. They claim she was thrown into the arena to be executed by a specially trained animal, specifically a giraffe that had been trained to kill. Whether it was a beast or the blade, the state's angel of death finally met the one poison she couldn't outrun: justice. The Antinoopolis doll, the 13 needles. Our final case isn't just a story or a dusty legend. It's an object you can actually go and see today in the Louvre Museum. Inventory number E27145. But after hearing its history, you might not want to look it in the eyes. In the 4th century in the Egyptian city of Antinoopolis, a man named Sarapamon became obsessed. But this wasn't a schoolyard crush. This was a dark, suffocating fixation with a woman named Ptolemaeus. When she rejected him, Sarapamon didn't move on. Instead, he sought out a practitioner of the dark arts. Together, they created this. This isn't some Hollywood movie prop. This is an authentic defixio, a binding curse. And the placement of the needles was a ritualistic map of agony. 13 bronze needles were driven into this clay figure with surgical, malicious precision. 2 needles were hammered into the eyes, so Ptolemaeus could never look at another man. One was driven into her mouth to silence her voice. Others were placed in her hands, her organs, and even the soles of her feet. Why the feet? So she could never walk anywhere else, except to Sarapamon's door. But the method of delivery was the creepiest part. Saripaman didn't just hide this doll, he buried it inside a grave. In ancient Egyptian Greek magic, this was a practice known as asaroi. They believed that the spirits of people who died young or violently were restless and stuck between worlds. By burying the doll with the dead, Saripaman was essentially hiring a ghost to be his supernatural bounty hunter. The spirit was commanded to torment Ptolemaeus, to haunt her dreams, and shadow her every move until she surrendered. Buried with the doll was a lead tablet. The inscription reads, "Do not allow her to eat, drink, or sleep until she comes to me, Saripaman, and satisfies my desire." We have no idea if the curse worked. History lost track of Ptolemaeus 1,700 years ago. But today, as that doll sits behind the glass in the Louvre, you can still feel the cold, sharpened edge of a man's obsession. An obsession so dark, he was willing to disturb the dead just to own a woman's soul. The ancient world wasn't just a place of white marble and philosophy. It was a place of deep shadows, where people lived in fear of the unexplained and the truly evil. Which of these three cases chilled you the most? The haunted house, the imperial poisoner, or the cursed doll? Let me know in the comments. And if you're still watching, you might want to check the locks on your door tonight.